10,000 North Korean soldiers have just crossed into Russia, not as refugees, not as workers, but as combat troops heading straight for Ukraine's front lines. For the first time since the Korean War ended in 1953, Pyongyang is sending its own military forces to fight on foreign soil. But why would Kim Jong-un risk his elite troops in a war thousands of miles from home? And what does this unprecedented deployment mean for Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and global security? This is about far more than just manpower. This is a desperate deal between two isolated regimes, the emergence of a new axis of authoritarian power, and a dangerous warning shot that's reshaping the entire global security landscape. Today we break down exactly why Kim Jong-un's move changes everything. Let's start with the hard facts on the ground. Between mid-October and early November 2024, intelligence agencies confirmed that between 10,000 and 12,000 North Korean troops arrived in Russia's Kursk region, near the Ukrainian border. But these aren't just ordinary conscripts pulled from rice fields. The first deployment wave consisted of approximately 2,600 soldiers from North Korea's elite Storm Corps, officially known as the 11th Corps. These are special operations forces trained specifically for sabotage, reconnaissance, infiltration, and unconventional warfare behind enemy lines. Think of them as Pyongyang's answer to the U.S. Green Berets or Russian Spetsnaz. What makes Storm Corps different from regular North Korean infantry? First, they're among the best-fed soldiers in the entire Korean People's Army, a significant distinction in a country where malnutrition is widespread even among military personnel. Second, their ideological indoctrination is extreme, even by North Korean standards. These troops have been raised on decades of anti-Western propaganda and absolute loyalty to the Kim dynasty. Third, their training emphasizes light infantry tactics, mountain warfare, sniper operations, and airborne assault capabilities. But here's the critical weakness. Almost none of these soldiers have any real-world combat experience with modern 21st century warfare. North Korea hasn't fought a major conventional war since the armistice was signed in 1953, over 70 years ago. These troops have never faced combat drones, electronic warfare jamming, precision artillery guided by satellite systems, or the kind of integrated NATO intelligence that Ukraine now employs. They've trained in simulations and exercises, but the Ukrainian battlefield is unlike anything they've ever encountered. The result has been absolutely catastrophic. By early 2025, UK Ministry of Defense intelligence estimates placed North Korean casualties at over 6,000 soldiers. That's nearly half of the entire initial deployment force killed or wounded in just a few months of fighting. The losses were so severe that Kim Jong-un personally ordered the construction of a memorial monument in Pyongyang to honor the fallen troops, a rare public admission from a regime that typically hides military failures. This is shaping up to be North Korea's bloodiest foreign military adventure in over 7 decades. So why would Kim Jong-un accept such devastating losses? Why risk his elite forces in a foreign war? The answer is simple. This isn't about ideology or solidarity. It's about survival, leverage, and a calculated exchange that benefits both dictatorships. North Korea has effectively become Russia's emergency military arsenal. By October 2024, Western intelligence confirmed that Pyongyang had shipped at least 20,000 shipping containers filled with military equipment to Russia. What's inside those containers? An estimated 8 million artillery shells, mostly Soviet-era 122mm and 152mm rounds that fit Russian gun systems perfectly. Also included, KN-23 and KN-24 short-range ballistic missiles, anti-tank weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, small arms ammunition, and potentially even multiple launch rocket systems. To put this in perspective, North Korea maintains one of the world's largest artillery arsenals, over 13,000 artillery pieces and 5,500 multiple rocket launchers. Much of this equipment is outdated, but the ammunition is exactly what Russia desperately needs. After nearly 3 years of grinding attrition warfare in Ukraine, Russia's own Soviet-era ammunition stockpiles are running critically low. Domestic production can't keep pace with battlefield consumption rates that sometimes exceed 20,000 shells per day. North Korea's massive Cold War-era stockpiles are a lifeline. But Kim Jong-un isn't doing this out of charity or communist brotherhood. In exchange for troops and weapons, Russia is providing North Korea with something far more valuable: advanced military technology and hard currency. Intelligence reports confirm that Moscow has already transferred at least one Panzer S-1 air defense system to North Korea for reverse engineering. Russia is also sharing electronic warfare equipment, satellite technology, missile guidance systems, and potentially even nuclear submarine propulsion data. The strategic implications are enormous. North Korea's ballistic missile program has made rapid advances in recent years, and Russian technical assistance could help Pyongyang develop more accurate guidance systems, better reentry vehicle technology for ICBMs, and improved solid-fuel rocket motors. There's also growing evidence that Russia helped North Korea successfully launch its first military reconnaissance satellite in November 2023. This partnership was formalized in June 2024 when Putin and Kim signed a new treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership during Putin's visit to Pyongyang, his first trip to North Korea in 24 years. The treaty includes a mutual defense clause requiring each country to provide military assistance if the other is attacked. It's essentially a revival of the old Cold War alliance, and it openly violates multiple UN Security Council resolutions. But with Russia holding veto power and China reluctant to enforce sanctions, who's going to stop them? This Russia-North Korea military alliance isn't just about Ukraine. The strategic ripple effects are spreading across multiple theaters and reshaping security calculations worldwide. First, let's look at the Korean peninsula itself. North Korea's decision to deploy troops abroad coincides with a dramatic escalation of tensions at home. In October 2024, North Korea destroyed key sections of inter-Korean roads and railways, physically severing the last remaining land connections with South Korea. Pyongyang has conducted multiple ballistic missile tests, including launches of its new Hwasong-18 solid-fuel ICBM. Kim Jong has publicly abandoned the goal of peaceful reunification and now refers to South Korea as a permanent enemy state. South Korea and Japan are deeply alarmed, not just by the troop deployment itself, but by the advanced Russian military technology now flowing into North Korean hands. Improved air defense systems threaten U.S. and allied air superiority in any future Korean conflict. Better missile guidance technology makes North Korea's nuclear arsenal more dangerous. Electronic warfare capabilities could disrupt U.S. military communications and GPS systems across the region. The result? Both Seoul and Tokyo are calling for stronger U.S. security commitments, expanded missile defense deployments, and some voices are even discussing the previously taboo option of developing their own independent nuclear deterrence. Second, consider China's uncomfortable position. Beijing officially maintains close ties with both Russia and North Korea. But this new military partnership creates serious problems for Chinese strategic interests. China wants to balance against U.S. influence by cooperating with Moscow and Pyongyang, but it doesn't want instability or conflict on its borders. If North Korea's military adventurism provokes a wider crisis, whether in Ukraine or Korea, China could face refugee flows, economic disruption, and unwanted U.S. military buildups right on its doorstep. Furthermore, as NATO increasingly focuses on Indo-Pacific security and strengthens partnerships with Japan, South Korea, Australia, and the Philippines, China's own strategic environment becomes more challenging and constrained. Third, the implications for NATO and Europe are profound. The Russia-North Korea axis demonstrates that Moscow is far from isolated despite Western sanctions. It shows that authoritarian regimes can cooperate across continents to sustain military operations and evade international pressure. It forces NATO to think globally rather than regionally. The old Cold War distinction between European and Asian security theaters no longer applies. The alliance must now prepare for interconnected, multi-theater threats where conflicts in one region directly impact security in another. Let's be absolutely clear about what this deployment really means. It's a glaring sign of Vladimir Putin's desperation and Russia's deepening manpower crisis. Russia's domestic mobilization efforts are failing badly, despite offering massive signing bonuses, now exceeding $22,000 in some regions, which is more than 3 years of average Russian salary. Recruitment offices are struggling to meet their quotas. The initial wave of prison recruitment, which released thousands of convicts in exchange for military service, has been largely exhausted. Regional governors are under intense pressure from Moscow to deliver more troops, but public resistance is growing as casualties mount and economic conditions deteriorate. Russian families are increasingly unwilling to send their sons to fight in what was supposed to be a quick special military operation, but has turned into a grinding war of attrition approaching its third year. So why turn to North Korean troops? Because they solve multiple problems simultaneously. First, they're expendable from Putin's political perspective. North Korean casualties don't appear in Russian statistics, don't generate angry Russian mothers demanding answers, and don't undermine domestic support for the war. Second, they're ideologically reliable in ways that even Russian conscripts aren't. These troops won't question orders, won't surrender easily, and won't spread dissent. Third, they're outside the Russian public's direct line of sight. Most Russians will never see these foreign troops, making it easier for state propaganda to maintain the fiction of a successful operation. But this gamble carries enormous risks for Putin. The presence of foreign troops fighting on Russian soil and in occupied Ukrainian territory completely shatters the Kremlin's carefully constructed narrative of a patriotic Russian operation to protect ethnic Russians. It exposes the manpower crisis that Moscow has tried desperately to hide. It demonstrates Russia's growing dependence on rogue states and pariah regimes, hardly the image of a great power that Putin wants to project. And it creates potential complications if these North Korean troops commit atrocities, surrender to Ukrainian forces, or simply prove ineffective on the battlefield. This military alliance between Russia and North Korea isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a broader realignment of authoritarian regimes that's reshaping the entire international order. Look at the bigger strategic picture. Russia has also dramatically deepened its military relationship with Iran, importing thousands of Shahid 136 kamikaze drones, Fateh 110 and Zulfiqar ballistic missiles, and hosting Iranian military advisors and technicians on Russian soil. Iran benefits by getting combat data on its weapons systems, hard currency payments, and potentially Russian assistance with its nuclear program and air defense systems. China, while more cautious and calculated in its approach, is quietly providing Russia with crucial economic lifelines, purchasing Russian oil and gas at discounted prices, supplying dual-use technologies that have military applications, and helping Moscow evade Western financial sanctions through alternative payment systems. Beijing hasn't provided direct military aid, but its economic support is absolutely essential to sustaining Russia's war effort. What we're witnessing is the emergence of what some analysts call a new axis of upheaval. Russia, North Korea, and Iran as the core members, with China as a shadow player providing indirect support. These regimes share common interests, challenging U.S. global leadership, undermining the Western-led international order, evading sanctions, and supporting each other's authoritarian governance models. The implications of this axis are far-reaching. First, arms proliferation. North Korean artillery systems and missiles are now combat-tested in Ukraine, making them more attractive to other regimes and non-state actors in Africa, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Second, sanctions evasion. Russia and North Korea are building sophisticated networks using cryptocurrencies, shell companies, third-country intermediaries, and ship-to-ship transfers to bypass Western financial controls. Third, nuclear risk. Russian technology transfers could help North Korea miniaturize nuclear warheads, improve ICBM accuracy, develop better submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and potentially even assist with thermonuclear weapon designs. This axis is directly challenging the US-led world order, betting that the West is too distracted, too divided, or too war-weary to respond with sufficient force and unity. For Ukraine, the arrival of North Korean troops provides Russia with a short-term manpower boost, but it comes at an enormous cost in effectiveness. These soldiers lack experience with modern integrated warfare, don't speak Russian, and are suffering catastrophic casualty rates. Their presence is unlikely to fundamentally change the strategic balance on the battlefield, but it does prolong the conflict and forces Ukraine to allocate resources to counter this new threat. Ukrainian intelligence is already working to exploit communication barriers and cultural differences between Russian and North Korean forces. For Russia, Putin is buying time and bodies, but at a devastating price to Russian sovereignty and independence. Every North Korean soldier on Russian soil is a visible reminder of Moscow's weakness. Relying on troops from one of the world's poorest countries, depending on Iranian drones, and begging North Korea for ammunition. This isn't the image of a resurgent superpower. It's the portrait of a declining power desperately clinging to imperial ambitions it can no longer afford. For North Korea, Kim Jong-un gets exactly what he wants. Hard currency payments estimated at $2,000 per soldier per month, advanced military technology that would take decades to develop independently, combat experience for his officer corps, and international relevance. But every coffin returning to Pyongyang, and there are thousands, is a stark reminder of the regime's willingness to sacrifice its own people for geopolitical leverage and technological advancement. For the broader world, we're entering a dangerous new era where authoritarian regimes cooperate seamlessly across continents, sharing weapons, technology, tactics, and intelligence. The old assumptions about regional conflicts staying contained within their theaters no longer apply. What happens in Ukraine directly affects security calculations in Seoul, Tokyo, and Taipei. What happens on the Korean Peninsula influences NATO planning in Europe. The lines between regional conflicts are blurring, and the interconnected nature of these threats demands coordinated, global responses from democratic nations. The West faces a critical choice: respond decisively to this emerging axis with strengthened alliances, increased defense spending, and unified sanctions enforcement, or watch as authoritarian cooperation grows bolder and more dangerous. If you found this deep dive analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button right now for more military intelligence and geopolitical breakdowns you won't find anywhere else. What do you think NATO and the West should do about this Russia-North Korea military alliance? Should South Korea and Japan develop their own nuclear deterrence? Drop your analysis in the comments below.